Deidre stood up at the head of my father's table with a butter knife in her hand, tapped her water glass twice, and started the introductions. She did it every Thanksgiving. A card table shoved against the good one, 2 pies cooling on the sideboard, 17 relatives with their forks already up, plus my son and me, and my sister walking her voice around the room like a woman giving a tour of a house she owned. Chase, my husband, Peyton, my daughter, 4th grade, all A's. Dad, obviously, Mom, Aunt Charmaine, who drove down from Canton in the rain. Her hand went around the curve of the table. 19 dishes on it. I had made all 19. I had gotten off shift at the hospital at 11 the night before and started the stock at midnight, and I had carried the last of it up my father's porch steps in 2 trips that morning, while Chase held the door with his foot and told me the gravy smelled like last year. Her hand stopped at the end of the table. And that's the bastard. Theo was 7. His left hand was in mine under the tablecloth, where it had been since we sat down, and his right hand was holding a fork straight up because he had been told twice to wait for Grace. Nobody moved. Aunt Charmaine reached across for the cranberry. Then Peyton looked up from her plate with her chin greasy and asked, "What's a bastard?" And my sister answered her. She turned to her 9-year-old, and she used the patient voice, the reading log voice, and she said it slowly enough for a child to write down. "He's not a cousin, sweetheart. He's a mistake we feed." Theo's hand went tight in mine, not a squeeze, a grip, the kind a kid makes on a dock. Chase snorted into his beer and said, "She's not wrong." Aunt Charmaine laughed into her napkin, one short bark, and then covered it with a cough. And my father, 69 years old, at the head of a table he had held for 40 years, looked at the turkey I had brined for 2 days and said, "Let's eat before it goes cold." I set my water glass down. I turned my phone over, face up, on the tablecloth next to the salt. I pressed the red circle. Ohio only needs one person in the room to agree, and I was in the room. "Say it again," I said, slowly. The whole table heard me. My father heard me. Deidre had her purse hooked on the back of her chair with her notary stamp in it, because Aunt Charmaine had brought a car title to be signed after Pie, and my sister never went anywhere without her seal, and she smiled at me the way she used to smile at me when we were girls, and she had already told Mom her version. She leaned forward and she gave it to me. "He is not a cousin." A pause you could have parked a truck in. "He is a mistake that we feed." I did not say anything. I kept my hand where it was. 5 years I had come to that table because Theo wanted a cousin, and a boy who is told he isn't one will believe it if the only proof he has is that his mother stopped bringing him. And then my son put his fork down. He put it down flat, the way I taught him, tines to the cloth. He looked up the length of that table at my sister, past the good candlesticks and the 2 pies, and he asked her one question. "Aunt Deidre, if I'm a mistake, why did you need my signature?" I want you to understand that I did not know what he meant. Her chair hit the floor. Not scraped. Hit. Went over backward with her purse still on it, and the seal clattering out onto my father's rug. And she was through the kitchen and out the side door before Peyton had finished turning around to look. My father stood up. He did not look at Theo. He did not look at me. He went out after her. I picked up the gravy boat, which was empty, and carried it into the kitchen, because that is what I am for. And I stood at the sink and watched through the window over it, while my sister leaned on the fender of her car with both hands, and while my father opened her passenger door and reached into the glove box and took out a blue zippered bank pouch and put it inside his coat. Aunt Charmaine said, "Well, somebody passed the rolls." Theo picked his fork back up because nobody told him not to. My sister did not come back to that table for 35 minutes. When she did not sit down. She stood at the sideboard cutting the second pie, and she cut it into 9 pieces for 19 people, and the server went out of her hand and off the rug twice before Chase took it away from her and finished. That was last Thanksgiving. That was November 27th, and I have thought about that pouch every day since. And I want to be honest with you about what I did next, because it was not scream and it was not cry. I ate. I served pie. I washed my father's dishes in my father's sink for an hour and 12 minutes, and when Deidre came back inside, I told her the stuffing turned out dry, and she said it always does. Theo had signed something. I had until April to find out what. And Deidre had until April to sign it again. My name is Myrna. I'm 31. I run the kitchen at a hospital where I feed 406 people a day, And for 5 years, my family has been telling a room full of relatives that they feed me. If that sentence did something to your jaw, stay with me. This one takes a year to land, and it lands on more than one of them. And if you'd hit subscribe before we get to the part where a stamp comes out of a purse, I'd take it as a kindness. Here's what I knew driving home that night, and it was almost nothing. Route 18 was wet. Theo had a plate of leftovers on his lap under a paper towel, and he had not said a word since we passed the sheets. In the mirror, I could see him turning something over in his fingers. "Buddy, I'm not in trouble," he said. It was not a question. He had decided it was not going to be a question. "You're not in trouble." She said it was a secret grown-up job. He held it up so I could see it in the headlights of the car behind us. A pen. A cheap white stick pen with a blue clip and printing down the barrel. She said I was helping the family. Am I still helping? I pulled into the lot of a closed garden center and put the car in park and turned around in my seat. The printing on the pen said Buckeye Ridge Credit Union, and under that, Route 8 branch, and under that, a phone number. "Tell me about the job," I said. He told me. It had been in the spring, he thought, because he still had his light jacket. Aunt Deidre picked him up from aftercare on a Thursday, which never happened, and she got him a milkshake at the place with the cow on the sign, and then they went in somewhere with a rope line and a lady behind glass, and Grandpa Wade was already there in his good jacket. They gave Theo a card to write his name on. He wrote Theo, and the lady said his E was backwards and laughed at him in the nice way, so he wrote it again underneath and got it right. Aunt Deidre said, "Good boy." Aunt Deidre said, "Don't tell your mom, because it's a surprise, and surprises only work if you don't tell." He had kept it for 8 months. 8 months, a boy who is called the bastard at his own grandfather's table kept a secret for the woman who called him that, because for one afternoon she needed him and it felt like being needed. I said, "You were helping, you're done helping now, I've got it." "Okay," he said, and then after a mile, "Can I keep the pen?" "No," I said, "I need to borrow it, you'll get it back." I have that pen in a drawer right now. It was, at that point, the only thing my sister had ever given my son. 3 days later, on Sunday, she called me 11 times between noon and 4. I did not pick up. I was at work covering a call-off, plating 300 trays of turkey that had been ordered in July, and every time the phone lit up on the stainless next to the ticket rail, one of my cooks looked at it and then looked at me and I said, "Pull the next rack." At 4:19, she stopped calling and texted instead. "Myrna, I was drunk and I was awful and I'm sorry. Let me give you $2,000 for Theo for Christmas. Just make him stop saying that at family things. Please, it's not what it sounded like." I read it twice standing in the walk-in with the door open on my shoulder. 11 calls is panic. $2,000 is a number. Nobody offers a number for something that isn't what it sounded like. I screenshotted it. Then I went back out on the line and finished my racks, and on my break I sat in my car in the employee lot and called the number printed on a child's pen. The fraud line at Buckeye Ridge was closed until Monday. The recording told me my call was important. I wrote the hours on the back of my hand in Sharpie like I do with anything I refuse to forget, and I sat there with the engine off until the windows went white. Monday, the woman in fraud asked me for Theo's social security number and his date of birth, and then she went quiet for long enough that I could hear her keyboard stop. "Ma'am," she said, "how old did you say he is?" Let me back up, because you need to know why a woman lets somebody call her son that for 5 years and keeps showing up with 19 dishes. I was 23 when I had him. His father is a man named Grant Poole, who worked seasonal at the quarry and who left this county 3 weeks before Theo was born and never came back, never called, never signed a thing. There is a blank on my son's birth certificate where a name goes. In my family, that blank became a job title. My mother stopped putting my school pictures out. My father said one sentence to me in the hospital parking garage: "You know what people will say." And then he said nothing else about it for 8 years, which in the Ashworth family counts as generous. And Deidre, who was 31 that year, and married and struggling, and had just been passed over at the tax office for the second time, found something she could be better than. She had never been better than me at anything, than she was. So I did what the youngest one does. I made myself necessary. I learned to cook the way our grandmother cooked, and then better, and I brought the food, and I carried it up the steps myself, and I sat where I was put. There were 16 good chairs in my father's dining room. There have been 16 for as long as I can remember, and the card table on the end takes the overflow. And every year since Theo could sit at a table, one of us has eaten on the aluminum folding chair from the garage, the one with the cracked green webbing and the leg that walks on a rug. It was mine, every year. Nobody assigned it. It was just always by my place when I came in from the kitchen with the gravy. And every year Deidre said, "We've got to get a real one," and every year we didn't. Grandma Ruth used to drag it around next to me on purpose. She'd sit on it herself with her plate on her knees and tell my father that the head of the table is wherever the food comes from. She died in March of 2024. After that, nobody sat next to me. That is the reason I kept going, not the chair. The idea that if I stopped bringing my son, they would have won the argument about what he was without ever having to make it out loud. I want to tell you the exact minute that ended, because it wasn't at the table. It was Monday, December 1st, at 8:52 in the morning, in my car, with a woman from a credit union fraud department on speaker. "Ma'am, I'm showing 3 accounts associated with that social security number," she said. A share account opened this past March, a Visa opened in April, and a member signature loan opened in May for $15,000. A pause. The share account lists a joint owner named Theodore R. Ashworth. The other 2 are in his social alone. "He's 7. I understand. How was 6 in March?" "Ma'am," she said, "I'm going to need you to come in." The Route 8 branch of Buckeye Ridge Credit Union has a rope line for 4 people and a bowl of butterscotch on the counter. The fraud officer's name was Yvonne Prather, and she had a cardigan and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she put 3 photocopies on the desk in front of me and turned them around so I could read them right side up. The first was a membership signature card dated the 6th of March. There were 2 signatures in the box at the bottom. The top one was a child's printing pushed up against the line, Theo, with the E facing the wrong way, and somebody had drawn a light pencil X through it. Under it, on the second line, the same 4 letters again, correct, slower, the O closed too hard. The next signature on the card belonged to Deidre M. Kessler, joint owner. The third line said sponsoring adult, and my father's name was on it. Wade R. Ashworth, in the same cramped hand that had signed my report cards. "A minor can hold a joint account with an adult member," Yvonne said. "It's very normal. We do it for grandparents constantly." She slid the second page over. "This is the parental consent." It was a half-sheet form. My name was typed at the top. Myrna J. Ashworth, custodial parent. At the bottom there was a signature that was not mine, and had never been mine. My M is a mountain range. This M was a scribble with a loop. And beside it, pressed into the paper hard enough to emboss it, a round purple stamp. Deidre M. Kessler, Notary Public, State of Ohio. My commission expires June 11, 2026. She notarized it herself, I said. Yvonne took her glasses off. She notarized her own consent form, I said, for her own account, with her own name in the joint owner box. "Ma'am," Yvonne said, "I want to be careful about what I say to you before our investigator looks at this." "Then say the third page." The third page was the loan. $15,000, member signature loan, the 8th of May, in the name of Theodore R. Ashworth, with a date of birth typed in, that would make him 24 years old. 60 payments, 3 of them made, nothing since August. I asked what happens to a loan that stops. "It charges off," she said, "and it reports." "Reports where?" "To all 3 bureaus." She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Ma'am, under both names. So somewhere in a database that will follow him into every apartment application, and every car loan, and every job that runs a check, my 7-year-old son had a credit history. 3 trade lines, $19,268 past due, a file older than his 2nd grade class picture. I did 3 things that afternoon before I let myself drive home, and I want to be specific about them, because for the next 9 months I did not do one thing I could not put a date on. I started a protected consumer freeze on my son at all 3 bureaus, which a parent has the right to do and which takes a certified copy of his birth certificate, a copy of my license, and a month of waiting per bureau. I filed an identity theft report on the Federal Trade Commission's website from my phone and wrote the case number on the back of my hand under the Sharpie from Sunday. And I wrote out, long hand on the back of the branch's own letterhead, a request for certified copies of every document with my son's number on it, and I walked it back inside and made Yvonne date stamp my copy. My sister's commission was on the Secretary of State's website in about 9 seconds, because anybody with a phone can look up a notary in this state. What I wanted was the other thing, so I drove to the county recorder's office on East Market and asked a clerk about it. "That's the notary's own book," she said. "Her journal. Nobody keeps it at the courthouse. She keeps it in her desk. She's supposed to write down every single thing she stamps." She chewed her gum. "You'd be shocked how many don't." Deidre kept one. Deidre kept a beautiful one. She had shown it to us at Easter 3 years ago, a black bonded ledger with a ribbon, and she had told the table that a notary journal is the only thing standing between this country and chaos. I did not go get it. Not then. A thing like that, you only get to ask for once, and you ask for it through somebody with a bar number. I drove home and made Theo grilled cheese and cut it on the diagonal because that is the only correct way, and while he ate it, I sat across from him, and I did not say one word about any of it. He asked if we were going to Grandpa's for Christmas. I said I didn't know yet. He said, "Peyton's getting a phone." There is a shoebox on the top shelf of my closet with rubber bands around it. Everybody has one. Mine has Theo's hospital bracelet, the lease from the apartment on Ridgewood, and 8 years of anything that came in an envelope with a window. I found what I was looking for at 1 in the morning on the floor of my closet with the light on, and I had to sit down on the carpet when I did. Spring of 2022. A notice from the Internal Revenue Service, 1 page, generated for tax year 2021. My return had been rejected electronically. The dependent Social Security number listed on my return had already been claimed on another accepted return for that year. I remembered the phone call about it, the way you remember a smell. I had called Deidre because Deidre did everybody's taxes. Deidre worked at Brandt and Loomis and had a plaque, and Deidre had sighed the way she sighed and said, "Oh, honey, that's the glitch. They've been doing that all season. It's a database thing with the hyphenated names. Our name is not hyphenated." She told me to print it and mail it in the old way, and not to worry about the refund being slow, and I did, and it was slow, and it came, and I bought Theo a bed with a rail on it. She had answered the phone in a tone. That's the part I kept turning over on that closet floor. Not the lie, the tone. She had known what that letter was before I finished reading it to her, because she was the one who had made it exist, and she had a sentence ready. I filed a request for my own tax transcripts the next morning. Form 4506T, one for every year from 2020 through 2024, and because I did not trust anything that came through a family member's hands. I asked for them mailed to my address at work, Attention Kitchen Manager, where the mail is signed for. Dale told me later what to look for, but I found it before he told me, because it was not subtle. They took 29 days. They came in a bundle with a rubber band, and I read them standing up in the loading dock hallway with the walk-in compressor running behind me. Tax year 2020, tax year 2021, tax year 2022, tax year 2023, tax year 2024. Every single year, the same code on my own account. The dependent claimed on my return had already been claimed on a return the service accepted before mine. 5 years. 5 times somebody had gotten to my son's Social Security number first, in February, while I was still waiting on my W-2. My transcripts do not say who. My transcripts are not allowed to say who. But I have a phone in my hand every February, when the same woman texts the same 3 words to the same group chat, and the words are "I'm open early." 5 Thanksgivings. 5 introductions. 5 times she stood up at that table and told 17 people that my son was a mistake they fed, while she was telling the federal government, in writing, under penalty of perjury, that he lived in her house. Because that is what the claim requires. Not love, not blood, residence. More than half the year, under her roof, eating her food. She had gotten paid for feeding him. Every April, for 5 years, she had gotten paid for feeding a child who had never spent one night in her house, and then every November she had gotten up and made a joke about it in front of him. I sat down on an upturned milk crate in that hallway, and I did not cry, because Rico came around the corner with a hotel pan, and I had to tell him the tilt skillet was down and to hold the gravy for the 4 o'clock trays. But I did do one thing before I went back on the line. I texted my sister, Are you doing my taxes again this year? She answered in 90 seconds. Of course I am. I always do. Love you. Dale Vosberg's office is over a hearing aid store, and he charges $250 an hour, and he does not take a retainer under $3,000. I brought him a plastic grocery bag with everything in it, and he laid it out on his conference table in rows like a man doing a jigsaw puzzle by edge color. I was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled one page toward him and put his finger on the purple stamp. This, he said, is the one that ends her. The loan is bigger. The loan is money. Money is a fight. He tapped the stamp twice. A notary can't notarize an instrument she has a beneficial interest in. She's the joint owner named in the document she notarized. That's not a gray area, Ms. Ashworth. That's the first page of the handbook. And if the signature above it isn't yours, then what she notarized is a forgery she needed for herself, which makes her a principal, not a witness. What happens to her? To her commission? The Secretary of State pulls it. He sat back. To her career? She has a preparer tax identification number. The Justice Department can go to a federal judge under Section 7407 and enjoin her from ever preparing a return for money again, and the service can pull that number the same week. To her freedom, that depends on a prosecutor and how good her lawyer is. But forgery and identity theft of a minor in this state is a felony, and the minor part is not a garnish, it's a sentencing factor. I asked him what I had to do. Nothing fast, he said. That's the hard part. You've got a 5-year pattern and one hard document, and a pattern is worth more than a document if you can show it's still running. He looked at me over the puzzle. Is it still running? She just texted me that she's doing my taxes again. Dale Vosberg took his glasses off and cleaned them on his tie for a while. Ms. Ashworth, he said, I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to say the ethical version of it. The something is, let her. Here is what I did not do, and it cost me more than anything I did. I did not tell my father what I was building. I sat on it through Christmas, which we spent at my apartment, just us, with a $9 tree from the Kroger lot that Theo picked because it was the ugliest and he said somebody had to. I sat on it through New Year's, when Deidre posted a photo of her family in matching plaid and captioned it, "Everyone I feed." I sat on it while my father called me on the 2nd of January and told me, in the voice he uses for parking garage sentences, that whatever happened at the table was over now, and we were not going to discuss it again. She apologized, he said. She offered me $2,000. That's an apology, Myrna. From her, that's an apology. I asked him what he took out of her glove box. The line stayed open. I could hear the television in his den, the weather guy, the one who says Clipper system. That's her business, my father said. You're on the card, Dad. What card? Sponsoring adult, I said. Buckeye Ridge, the 6th of March, your handwriting. I have replayed his answer maybe 600 times, because it is the thing I will have to explain to my son one day. She said it was so he'd have something, my father said. So he'd have a start. She said you'd be too proud. And then she stopped paying it in August. I don't know anything about August, he said, and he hung up. And my father is a man who has never once hung up a phone. Peyton turned 10 on the 24th of January. There was a party at the trampoline place on Cleveland-Massillon Road, and Theo had been talking about it since the invitation went in his folder at Christmas, because Peyton had told him at Christmas he could be on her team for the dodgeball part. The invitation never came. I found out at pickup on a Friday from another mother in the car line who said, "So nice that all the cousins get to be together," and then made a face like she had stepped on something. I called Deidre in the school lot with Theo in the back seat and the phone off speaker. We're keeping it to family, my sister said. Pans in the background. A dog. Don't make it a thing. Hi is family. Myrna. A cabinet closed. Do you want me to say it in front of your kid, or do you want to let it go? I let it go. I said fine and I hung up, and I drove my son to the trampoline place anyway, and I paid $12 for an hour of open jump on a Saturday afternoon while the party rooms were full. And he bounced by himself in the far corner where the little kids go, and every few minutes he stopped and looked through the glass at the room with the balloons. On the way home he said, "Did I do the wrong thing at Thanksgiving?" I pulled over. There is a rule I have about lying to my son, which is that I don't, and there is a rule about weight, which is that I don't put mine on him. You did the exact right thing, I said. You asked a true question. Grown-ups fall over when you do that, and it's not your fault they're not screwed down. I thought about it. Is Aunt Deidre in trouble? Not yet, I said. That is the last thing I told my son about it for 5 months, and I need you to hold on to the word yet, because on the 14th of February, I called my sister and asked her, in my nicest voice, if she could squeeze me in before the rush. 3 days before that call, on the 11th, the counselor at Fairlawn Elementary left a voicemail asking if I could come in at my convenience, which is what schools say when it is not convenient at all. Her office had a beanbag and a poster of a cartoon volcano labeled with feelings. She had a folder. She turned it around so I could read it right side up, which is the second time in 10 weeks somebody had done that to me. It was a worksheet. The second grade was doing a unit on families, and the prompt at the top said, "My family takes care of me by," and under it, in my son's handwriting, in pencil, with the capital letters he still can't stop using in the middle of words. My mom feeds 400 people at the hospital and she feeds me too. My other family feeds me because I am a mistake. That is what they are for. The counselor said he had been very matter-of-fact about it. She said he had asked her a question afterward, and she wrote it down because she thought I would want it exactly, and she read it off her legal pad. He asked her whether a mistake can be unmistaked, or whether it stays one forever, like a tattoo. I said thank you. I said I would handle it at home. I said no, we did not need a referral. I asked if I could keep the worksheet, and she said she would make me a copy, and I said no, I would like the original. And she looked at me for a second, and then she gave me the original. I sat in my car in the visitor space with that piece of paper on the steering wheel and the engine off. And I want to be honest about what happened in there, because it is the hinge of the whole year. I stopped being angry. Anger had gotten me to a fraud desk and a lawyer's conference table and 3 credit freezes. Anger is loud, and it is also fast, and it burns off. What came in after it was quiet, and it had a calendar in its hands. I had a 5-year pattern, one forged consent with her own seal on it, a charged-off loan, a federal identity theft report, and a lawyer who had told me the hard part was going slow. And I had a sister who filed everybody's taxes in the first week of March, every year, like a woman going to church. I looked at my son's handwriting and I said out loud in an empty car, "Okay." That is the entire announcement I made. That is the only one anybody got. Then I drove home and made him grilled cheese and told him that his worksheet was wrong and that we were going to fix it, and that the fixing part was mine and the being 8 in April part was his. On the 14th of February, I called my sister and asked her, in my nicest voice, if she could squeeze me in before the rush. I want to be careful describing the next part, because it is the part where I look like I gave up, and I need you to know I never once wrote down a word I didn't mean. I told her I had been in a bad place since Thanksgiving. That was true. I told her I had spent December scaring myself with things I found on the internet. That was true. I told her Dad was right that the family couldn't take another year of it, and that I was tired, and that I wanted to come in and have her do my taxes like always, and that I would like us to be okay. All of that was true too, in the way that a photograph of one corner of a room is true, she cried. My sister cried on the phone for 4 minutes, and then she said, "I knew you'd come around, you always do." And there it was, the tone from 2022, the one that has a sentence ready. Her office at Brandt and Loomis was a cubicle with a nameplate and a window onto the parking lot of a strip mall, and she had a candy dish, and on the wall behind her, in a black frame, her notary commission with the state seal on it. She did my return in 20 minutes. Head of household, 1 dependent, standard deduction, the earned income credit I qualify for, on a kitchen manager's salary. Then she stopped with her hand on the mouse. "I'm going to leave Theo off," she said. I made myself keep my face where it was. "Why?" "Because your account's flagged, honey, from that mess in 2021. If we put him on, it kicks out again, and you wait 9 months for your money." She was already clicking, and I watched my filing status change on her screen from head of household to single. "I'll fix it on my end like last time. You'll get more back this way anyway because of how the credit sits." That is a sentence a person says out loud, only if they have never once been asked a follow-up question in their entire life. I said okay. I signed the authorization she pushed across the desk, and then I asked her for the 2 things I had come for. "There's one more thing and then I'm done," I said. "The bank thing, with his name on it." Her hand stopped. "Deidre, I'm not fighting about it. I don't want to know why. I want his name off it. He's 7. Whatever it is, take him off and I'll never bring it up again, at Dad's or anywhere." You could watch it happen on her face. Relief with a floor under it. She thought she had just bought the whole year for the price of a phone call. "That's it?" she said. "That's it. I'll call them Monday." She laughed, and she leaned back, and she said the thing I will hear in my head for the rest of my life. "God, Myrna, all that over a savings account." "One more," I said. "Write it down for me. Just a sentence, so I can show Dad I'm letting it go and he'll stop calling me." And my sister, who never went anywhere without her seal, who had told a whole Easter table that a notary journal is the only thing standing between this country and chaos, pulled a sheet of her own letterhead out of the printer and wrote 4 lines saying that the Buckeye Ridge accounts opened in the name of Theodore R. Ashworth were opened by her, that she would contact the credit union to remove him, and that she took full responsibility for the balances. She signed it. And because signing is not enough for a woman like my sister, she reached into her purse and she stamped it. Then she handed it to me across the desk with 2 fingers, the way you hand somebody a napkin. I put it in my bag next to my son's worksheet, and I drove to a UPS store, and I made 3 certified copies, and I mailed one to my lawyer with a cover sheet, and I did not smile until I was back in the car. Because here is what my sister was going to do on Monday. She was going to call the fraud department at Buckeye Ridge Credit Union, on a recorded line, to ask them to remove a minor child's name from a charged-off $15,000 signature loan. And there was already a file open under that Social Security number with a federal identity theft report in it, and my affidavit, and a photocopy of a parental consent form that she had notarized for herself, and a note that the custodial parent had requested every document in writing. I did not tell her that. I did not tell anyone that. I just asked her to make the call. Yvonne Prather called me on Thursday the 5th of March at 7:40 in the morning while I was counting in a milk delivery. "Ms. Ashworth," she said, "I'm not able to discuss another member's communications with you." "I understand. I'm calling to tell you that our investigator has referred the file." I put the clipboard down on top of the crates. "Referred to who?" "That I can tell you," she said. "The Summit County Sheriff's Office, Financial Crimes. And because of the account documentation, we've also made a report to the Secretary of State's Notary Division." A pause, and I swear to you, her voice changed shape. "Ma'am, someone will contact you. It may be a while. These take a while." I said thank you, and I hung up, and I signed for 40 gallons of 2%, and then I went into the dry storage and stood between the shelves for exactly 1 minute, and then I came out and told Rico the milk was short 2 crates, and to call the vendor. The fuse was lit on the 5th of March. Nothing happened for 8 weeks. That is the part nobody tells you. You do the hardest thing you have ever done. You hand a stranger a folder that took you 3 months to build, and then the world does absolutely nothing, and your family keeps having birthdays. On the 22nd of March, my mother turned 66, and I went, and I brought a cake I made from scratch, and Grandma Ruth's roasting pan, with a pork loin in it. That pan is cast iron with a lid, and it weighs 11 pounds empty, and it is the only thing of Ruth's I got, because I was the only one who wanted it. After dinner, Deidre stood in my mother's kitchen with a dish towel and said, "Easy as weather. You should let me hang on to Nana's pan. Peyton's getting into cooking." Peyton was 10 and had never turned on a stove in her life. I said, "Sure." I washed it, and dried it, and oiled it with a paper towel the way Ruth taught me, and I carried my grandmother out to my sister's car and set it in her trunk, and I said thank you for having us, and I meant it, because I needed every person in that house to go to bed that night sure of one thing, that I had folded. My father walked me to my car. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, and he stood there while Theo climbed in the back, and then he said, "That's my girl. That's the Myrna I know. Good night, Dad." "You did the right thing," he said. "You'll see, families bend." I looked at him for a second longer than I had to, at his good jacket, the one from the credit union in March, and I thought about a blue zippered pouch going under it in the rain. "Some of them do," I said, and I got in the car. On the 2nd of April, I mailed 3 envelopes, all certified, all with green cards, from the post office on Ridgewood on my lunch break. The first went to the Internal Revenue Service, Fresno, California, a Form 14157 complaint against a paid preparer, and a Form 14039B for a dependent's stolen social, with her preparer number, 5 years of my transcripts, and 1 line at the bottom of the narrative that Dale Vosberg made me rewrite twice, until there was not 1 adjective left in it. The second went to the Ohio Secretary of State, Notary Division. A complaint with the consent form attached, the loan document showing her as joint owner, and a copy of a letter she had signed and stamped herself in February. The third went to my sister, from Dale's office, and it was 2 pages, and it said nothing at all except that his client was represented and that all future communication regarding Theodore R. Ashworth should be directed to him. I stood at the counter and got 3 green receipts back with a date stamp on them, and I put them in my wallet behind my license. There are 9 of those cards in my wallet now. That whole spring, that was what I had instead of telling anybody anything. And for the next 6 weeks, while those envelopes did whatever envelopes do inside buildings with flags on them, my sister had the best spring of her life. Theo turned 8 on the 12th of April, a Sunday, so we did the party on the Saturday. 4 boys from his class, and a sheet cake I decorated at 2 in the morning with a piping bag from work. And at 4:15 the mail came, and there was 1 card in it with a stamp of a hummingbird on it. It was addressed to the Ashworth boy, not to Theo, not to Theodore. My sister had written my son's name as a category, in her looping hand, on an envelope she had to lick. I got it out of the stack himself because he is 8 and mail with his address on it is a jackpot. He read the front of it. He looked at me, and then he looked at his friends in my kitchen with frosting on their faces, and he made a decision that no 8-year-old should have to make in under a second. He said, "It's a coupon," and he put it in the drawer with the takeout menus, and he went back outside. Inside was a $10 bill and a card that said, "Thinking of you," and a signature, "Aunt D." I put both in a plastic sleeve with the date written on it. And I did not spend the $10, and if you want to know what a person like me does with a spring like that, that is what she does. She sleeves it. 8 days later, my sister quit her job. I heard it from Aunt Charmaine, who calls me now and then, because she has decided we are close. Deidre had walked out of Brant and Loomis on a Monday, given no notice, and signed a 2-year lease on the end unit of the Copley Corners Plaza, between a vape shop and a place that does eyebrows. D. Kessler Tax and Notary Services. She had a sign made in the vinyl place, gold on maroon, with Notary Public in its own line underneath, in bigger letters than her name. And my father put up the money, $40,000 against the house on Wickford he has lived in since 1981 and paid off in 2009. Charmaine told me the number twice because she wanted me to react to it, and when I did not react, she said, "Well, he's proud of her." I did react. I reacted for about 4 seconds in my car in the hospital lot, with my hand flat on the steering wheel. Then I did the arithmetic that mattered, which is not $40,000. It is this. A person who takes a 2-year lease and borrows against her father's house is a person who believes, all the way down, that nothing is coming. She threw herself a soft opening on the 2nd of May. There are photographs. There is a ribbon and scissors with a bow on them, and 14 people, including my mother and my father and Peyton in a dress, and my sister in the middle of them holding a pair of scissors up like a trophy, and behind her on the counter, in a little wooden holder, a fresh stack of business cards. My father is in the 2nd row. He has his hands folded in front of him, and he is looking at her the way I have wanted him to look at me since I was 23. I know all this because Peyton posted it, and because Theo found it on my phone while looking for the dinosaur video. I looked at it for a while. Is Grandpa going to Aunt Deidre's new store instead of Thanksgiving? No, buddy. Because there's a store now, he said, working it out, so maybe that's where they eat. I told him Thanksgiving was still at Grandpa's. I did not tell him that on the 2nd of May, while my sister was cutting a ribbon, an envelope from Buckeye Ridge Credit Union was already sitting in my mailbox on Ridgewood, 4 miles away, unopened, because I had worked a double and had not gone to the boxes yet. I opened it that night, standing in the hallway with my keys still in my hand. Determination of fraudulent account activity. 3 accounts, opened the 6th of March, the 2nd of April, and the 8th of May, closed and charged off as fraud. All obligations of the minor Theodore R. Ashworth voided in full. Trade-aligned deletion requests submitted to all 3 consumer reporting agencies. Total loss to the institution, $19,268, referred for restitution. And at the bottom, a paragraph I read maybe 9 times. Documentation obtained in the course of this investigation has been provided to the Summit County Sheriff's Office and, separately, to the Ohio Secretary of State, Notary Commissions Division. A member communication dated February 16th is included in that referral. The 16th of February, the Monday she called them for me. I went in and sat on the edge of my son's bed while he slept with one arm off the side. And I did the only celebrating I did that entire spring, which was to say his whole name out loud in the dark. Theodore Reed Ashworth. Owes nothing. Owns nothing. 8 years old and clean as a plate. The letter about the notary came 13 days later, and it did not come to me. Aunt Charmaine again, of course. She called on a Sunday to ask if I had heard, and then told me without waiting. Deidre had gotten a letter from Columbus. Something about her commission. Deidre said it was a clerical thing, a renewal backlog, because her commission was up on the 11th of June anyway, and the state was slow, and everybody knows the state is slow. She's got that little office to run, Charmaine said. You can't do that work without the stamp. No, I said, you can't. There is a specific feeling to knowing something in a family where nobody tells you anything, and it is not what I expected. It is not power. It is a kind of loneliness with a very good view. Because I knew what the letter from Columbus was. Dale had told me what it would look like when it came. Notice of complaint. Notice of hearing. Notice that a renewal application had been suspended pending disposition. And my sister was standing in a plaza between a vape shop and an eyebrow place telling our aunt it was a backlog, and every single day she kept that sign lit. She was spending money that was going to have a lien on it. I did not warn her. I want to be plain about that, because people ask. I did not warn my sister, and I would not warn her now. But I did warn one person, and it was not for his sake. On the 29th of May, a detective named Bev Halloran called my father at 8 in the morning and asked him to come in and talk about a signature card. I know the date because he called me at 8:20, and my father's voice had a crack down the middle of it that I had not heard since the parking garage. Myrna, what did you do? I gave a credit union the documents they asked me for, I said. In December. They're saying I'm a witness. You are a witness, Dad. You signed it. I signed it because she asked me to. I know. I was breathing hard. In the background, the television, the weather guy. They asked me about a pouch, he said. And there it was, 6 months later, sitting in the open like it had been on the table the whole time. Dad, what's in the pouch? It's a payment book, he said. It's a payment book and the member's copy, the card, the one he wrote wrong the first time. He stopped. She was going to throw it in the burn barrel, Myrna. I took it so she wouldn't do something stupid. Where is it now? In my garage, in the coffee can. Then here's the only thing I'm going to say to you this year, I said. Do not move it. Do not mail it. Do not hand it to her. When Detective Halloran asks you where it is, tell her the truth and let her come get it. She's my daughter. So am I said. I did not say it loud. I have never once in my life said anything to my father loud. I was quiet for a long time, and then he said the only honest thing he said to me between November and June. I know what I did, he said. I just don't know when I did it. Detective Halloran picked up a Folgers can from my father's garage on the 3rd of June, and inside it, in a blue zippered bank pouch, was a coupon payment book with 3 stubs torn out and a membership signature card, voided, with a 6-year-old's name printed on it twice, the first time with the E facing the wrong way. The same afternoon, a certified letter arrived at Dale Vosberg's office from a man in Elko, Nevada. Dale called me at work about it and said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No, I'm at a steam table. Say it anyway." Here is what had happened, and I need you to understand that it happened for the most boring reason in the world. To pursue restitution for a minor and to clean up the last piece of my son's file, Dale had needed an affidavit establishing paternity, or a documented refusal. So in April he had done what lawyers do. He sent a letter to the last known address of Grant Poole, care of a quarry company's payroll department, with a form and a stamped envelope and no expectation whatsoever. Grant Poole wrote back 4 pages by hand. He said he had thought about it for 8 years. He said he was not asking for anything and would sign whatever we wanted. He said he had left in March of 2018 and had spent 3 weeks in his truck in a Walmart lot in Wheeling before he went west. And he said that the week before he left, he had gotten an email from my sister. He had printed it. He sent the printout. It is dated the 4th of March, 2018, from her old work address, and it is 2 paragraphs long, and it says that everybody in the family knows the baby is not his, that I had been seeing somebody at the restaurant, that the Ashworths would take care of it, and that if he had any self-respect, he would not make us all say it to his face. 9 sentences, that is what it took. She did not just call my son a mistake for 5 Thanksgivings. She built him one, in 2018, in 9 sentences, before he had a face. And then she stood up at a table every November and charged the family admission to look at what she made. I read those 4 handwritten pages in my car in the employee lot, with the door open and one foot on the asphalt, and I got through them twice before I had to put them face down on the passenger seat. For 8 years I had carried one sentence around under everything I did. He looked at what was coming and he decided it wasn't worth staying for. I had built a whole personality out of that sentence. I had cooked for people who despised me because of that sentence. Every folding chair I ever sat on, I sat on because some part of me had agreed with the verdict. It was not a verdict. It was a forgery, like everything else she ever notarized. I did not tell my son that his father had written. Not that week. An 8-year-old cannot hold a thing like that while he is also holding a birthday card addressed to a category. What I did instead was smaller. I took him to the license bureau on a Saturday to get his state ID card, which he had been asking for since a kid in his class got one, and while the woman typed, I said, "Read me your whole name off the screen." He read it, Theodore Reed Ashworth. Reed was Grandma Ruth's father's name, I said. You've got 3 names, and every one of them is somebody's, and nobody gets to shorten you into a word. He said, "Can I get the picture where I'm not blinking?" They gave him a second try. He blinked in that one too and kept it anyway. My sister's notary commission expired on the 11th of June, and the state of Ohio did not renew it. The letter used the phrase pending disposition of complaint, which Dale says is the most expensive 4 words in the administrative code, and it arrived at a maroon and gold storefront where a woman had 20 months left on a lease and a line of clients who needed things stamped. She kept stamping. I know that because a man named Otis, who runs the eyebrow place next door, and who had never met me in his life, ended up being the one who reported it. He had brought over a bill of sale for a car, and she had done it with an expired seal, and told him the renewal was in the mail, and he had gone home and typed her name into the state's lookup, the way anybody with a phone can, and found her listed as not in good standing, and he had gotten scared about his own car and called Columbus. That is not luck. That is what happens when a woman whose entire authority came from a purple circle keeps pressing it into paper after the state has told her not to. Every day she kept that office open. She made her own file thicker. The IRS is slower than a county and quieter than a state, and it does not knock. It writes. The first notice went out in the last week of June, and it did not go to me. It went to Deidre and Chase Kessler, jointly, at the house on Bramblewood, and it concerned tax years 2020 through 2024, and it proposed adjustments to a child tax credit, an earned income credit, and a credit for other dependents, 5 years deep. I know the numbers because Aunt Charmaine read them to me off the paper on their kitchen counter, twice, the way she reads everything. $27,806 in credits and refunds, plus accuracy penalties, plus 5 years of interest. $39,400, joint and several, which is a phrase that means the government does not care which one of you is sorry. Chase Kessler signed every one of those returns. He is a licensed public insurance adjuster. He spends his working life explaining to people that a signature is a statement. Their pontoon boat went on Marketplace on the 28th of June for $18,600, and it sold in 9 days, and I want to say the thing out loud that I only ever said to my lawyer. They bought that boat in the summer of 2023 with a refund. And the refund was bigger than it should have been by an amount I can name to the dollar, because I have the transcript. And the reason it was bigger is that they told the federal government they were feeding my son. They floated that boat on Portage Lakes for 2 summers with my child's name holding it up. She started calling me on the 2nd of July. 31 calls in 6 days. Then she came to my building. I was on the 3rd floor landing with 2 bags of groceries when I heard the buzzer going. And when I looked down the stairwell, my sister was standing in the vestibule with her hand flat on the panel, pressing every button in the row. I came down. I did not let her pass the inside door. I stood on my side of the glass with the milk sweating through the bag on my hip. She had lost weight in a way that does not look good on anybody. Her hair was up in the clip she wears when she cleans. They took my commission, she said. I know. Do you know what that does to me? I have a lease, Myrna. I have a lease and I have Dad's money in that place. I know. Say something else. Her hand hit the glass. Say literally anything else. So I said the only two sentences I had been carrying since a school counselor turned a folder around. He kept your secret for 8 months because you made him feel needed, I said. That's the part you should be talking to somebody about. She started to cry then, and my sister crying is a whole weather system, and through it she said, "You could have come to me. You could have come to me first, and we could have fixed it in the family." I did come to you, I said. On the 14th of February. You told me to let you handle it, and then you stamped it. I picked my grocery bags back up. Myrna, please, please, he's 8, he doesn't even know. He wrote it on a worksheet, I said, and I went upstairs. There is one thing I did not do, and I need to put it here, in the middle, and not at the end where it would look like a bow. Dale had drafted a letter to the Ohio Department of Insurance and to the bonding carrier that covers Chase Kessler's public adjuster license, laying out that a licensed adjuster had signed 5 federal returns claiming a child who did not live in his home. Dale said it was accurate, that it was supported, and that it would likely end the man's career in this state, and he said that if I wanted it sent, it would go out the same day. I sat with that letter for 4 days. Peyton Kessler is 10 years old. She has a nut allergy that has put her in an ambulance twice, and the insurance that covers the pen in her backpack comes through her father's employer. I told Dale not to send it. I did not do it because I forgave Chase Kessler, who laughed into a beer bottle and said she's not wrong. I did not do it because I am a good person. I did it because there is a line on my side of this, and it runs right where a 10-year-old's medicine is. And the whole point of everything I did that year was that children do not pay for what adults sign. He still owes $39,000. He still sold his boat. He just gets to keep the job, and he will never in his life know why. On the 9th of July, a box came from a probate attorney in Cuyahoga Falls. I had requested Ruth Ashworth's estate file myself back in May, for the dullest possible reason. Probate is public, and Dale wanted to know whether my son's name had ever been written down anywhere in that family on a document that mattered. It took 8 weeks and cost me $60 in copy fees. The file was 4 inches thick and almost all of it was nothing. The will, the inventory, the bond, a list of $6,000 in savings bonds distributed to each of Ruth's 2 great-grandchildren in the spring of 2024. And my son is one of the 2, which I had never once been told, and which is a conversation I will have with my father someday when I am a different kind of tired. And clipped to the inside of the back cover, there was a plain white envelope, sealed, soft at the corners, with my grandmother's handwriting on the front. It did not say my name. It said, "For the one who cooks." The attorney's cover memo said the decedent had left it with the office in 2019, with instructions that it be released with the file and not before. I put it in the drawer with the pen. I want to tell you I opened it that night. I did not open it for the rest of that summer. I had gotten very good by then at not touching things before they were ready. And now I have to go back, because I skipped something on purpose, and I have been skipping it for 10 minutes. My father turned 70 on the 20th of June, and the party was on the calendar since Easter, the Fairlawn Grange Hall, 61 people, a rented coffee urn, and my sister running it. And I did not go. That was the only invitation I ever turned down in 8 years. I sent a card. I worked a double. And I sat in my car afterward and let myself be exactly as sick about it as I was, because my father is 70 years old and he only gets so many of those. And because the man who signed the sponsoring adult line also drove me to my own driver's test. Deidre had told him Theo wasn't coming. Charmaine let that slip on the phone. We're keeping it adults mostly, and it's a lot for a little boy. So I stayed home with my son and made him breakfast for dinner, which is his favorite meal in the world. And at 7:40 that night, my father called me from the parking lot of the Grange Hall with the noise of 61 people behind him. She stood up, he said, in front of everybody. She stood up and thanked me for believing in her, and she told them the office is doing great. I did not say anything. Myrna, my father said, when is it going to happen? And I understood, standing at my sink with the water running over a pan, that my father had known for 2 weeks and had gone to his own birthday party anyway and sat there and eaten cake. I don't decide that, I told him. A prosecutor does. But you know. I know what I mailed and I know when I mailed it, I said. That's all anybody gets to know. He said my name once more, and then he said, "There's a chair here with nobody in it," and he hung up. The Summit County Grand Jury returned an indictment on the 7th of August. 4 counts: forgery, tampering with records, a misdemeanor count for putting a seal on paper she had no business putting a seal on, and identity fraud, with a note in the bill of particulars that the person whose identity was used was 6 years old at the time, which is not a decoration, Dale told me. It is the first thing a judge reads twice. The Journal came into it too, in the end. The sheriff subpoenaed the black bonded ledger with the ribbon, the one my sister had held up at Easter, and called the only thing standing between this country and chaos, and every act she ever performed is in that book in her own hand, except two. There is no entry for the 6th of March. There is no entry for the 14th of February. She was summoned, not arrested. She was arraigned on the 12th of August in a courtroom with a rubber plant in it, and she wore the navy blazer she wore to Grandma Ruth's funeral, and she said not guilty in a voice I could hear from the 4th row, and the judge set a trial date in February and told her not to notarize anything. My father sat in the 2nd row with my mother. He turned around once. I gave him nothing, because I did not have anything to give him yet. On Sunday the 16th, he called and asked me to come to the house. "It's the family," he said. "Everybody's coming. Charmaine, the Hendrickses, your Uncle Bill. We just want to sit down together, Myrna, that's all it is." "What's on the table, Dad?" I did not answer for a second, and then, because he is not a good liar, he told me. Deidre's attorney had drafted something. A family impact letter. 17 signatures from the relatives, asking the prosecutor to consider that this was an internal family financial misunderstanding, that no child had been harmed, and that a conviction would devastate a 10-year-old girl who had done nothing. They wanted mine at the top. They needed mine at the top, because a fraud case with a minor victim is not really improved by 17 people who are not the minor's mother. "Okay," I said, "I'll come at 4 and I'm bringing Theo." "Myrna." "He's the one it happened to," I said. "If 17 people are going to sign a piece of paper about whether a child was harmed, they can do it with the child in the room." I made a pie. I want that on the record. I made a sour cream apple pie with a walnut crumb on it because I am incapable of walking into that house empty-handed, and Theo carried it on his lap in the car with both hands flat on the plate. There were 16 good chairs and the aluminum folding chair from the garage, and somebody had already set the folding chair by my place. I sat in it. The letter was on the table in a plastic sleeve. My sister sat 3 places down with her hands in her lap and did not look up once. Chase was not there. Peyton was not there. My Uncle Bill did the talking, because in my family the person who does the talking is whoever has the least to lose. He talked about forgiveness. He talked about how the state does not understand families. He talked for 6 minutes, and at the end of it, he slid the plastic sleeve down the table toward me with 2 fingers, the way you hand somebody a napkin. I did not touch it. I took my own envelope out of my bag, and I laid 3 pages face up on my father's tablecloth and turned them around so the room could read them right side up. The first was the determination from Buckeye Ridge. 3 accounts. Fraud. $19,268. Obligations of a 7-year-old, voided. The second was the letter from Columbus, refusing to renew a notary commission, with the words unauthorized use of the seal in the middle of it, and a photocopy of a parental consent form with my name typed at the top, and somebody else's handwriting at the bottom, and a purple circle pressed hard enough to feel with your thumb. The third was an email printed on the 4th of March, 2018, 9 sentences long, sent to a man in a truck. Nobody read that one out loud. Charmaine read it to herself and put her hand over her mouth, and my Uncle Bill read it twice, and then took his glasses off and looked at my sister for a long time and did not put them back on. Theo sat next to me with his hands under the table and his feet not reaching the floor. "Here's what I'm signing," I said, and I put down a 4th page, and this one I had typed myself. It was 9 lines. It said that I would not be signing the letter. It said that I had never asked anyone in this family to be punished, and had never asked anyone in this family for money. It said that my son's name is Theodore Reed Ashworth, that no one in this room had used it in 5 years, and that from that day forward, no one in this family would speak to him, or about him, or hand him a card, until they had said all 3 words out loud. And it said, at the bottom, that I would keep bringing food to this house on the day I was invited by someone who could say them. Then I put the pen down. His pen. The white stick pen with the blue clip and Buckeye Ridge Credit Union down the barrel, which I had carried in my bag since December for a reason I could not have explained to you in January. That's what he signed, I said. That's the pen. It's on the table if anybody wants it. Aunt Charmaine started crying. My mother got up and went into the kitchen and ran water over something that was already clean. And my sister said, from 3 seats down, without lifting her head, "Theo." Just the one word. 8 months too late and in the wrong room and for the wrong reason. My son looked up at her, and then at me, and he said, "Can I have pie?" We had pie. It was a very good pie. Nobody signed anything. That is the moment where this story is supposed to end, with a woman driving home from a table with her spine straight. It did not end there, and the part that comes next is the part I still cannot get all the way through without stopping. The house on Bramblewood went on the market on the 12th of August. I found out the way I found out everything that year, which is Charmaine, and she was crying when she called because she had helped Deidre pick out the paint in that house in 2016. $39,000 to the IRS, $19,000 to a credit union that is not going to forget, a dead lease on a plaza storefront with 20 months left on it, a sign in gold on maroon that a vinyl shop will charge to remove, and $40,000 of my father's house sitting inside a business that cannot legally perform half of what its own sign advertises. And there was one more thing, and it was mine. Dale had filed a civil action in July on my son's behalf, through me as next friend, because Ohio lets you do that when somebody uses a child's identity. Statutory damages, actual damages, attorney's fees. Dale's number was $41,900, and he said we would get a judgment, and he said a judgment is a lien, and a lien on top of what the federal government had already filed against that house, was why it was going to have to sell instead of being carried on an installment plan for 6 years. That was my last move. I made it in July with a pen in a lawyer's office, and I made it on purpose, and I have never once pretended otherwise. Theo found out about the house on a Thursday because Peyton texted him from her mother's phone. 2 lines. "We are moving. I don't get to go to Fairlawn anymore." He came and stood in the kitchen doorway with the phone held out in front of him with both hands like it was hot. "Is this because of us?" I turned the burner off. I sat down at our table so my face would be lower than his, which is a thing I do. "It's because of what your aunt did," I said. "Not because of you. Not ever because of you. But the money part. He is 8. He is not stupid. The money part is us." So I told him the truth, in the smallest words I had. That there was money the court said belonged to him because his name had been used. That it was his. That taking it was the reason the house had to be sold instead of kept. I thought about it for a long time. He looked at the phone again. Then he put it face down on the table, which is a thing he has seen me do 1,000 times and which I did not know he had learned. "Is it enough money for a room?" "What?" "For Peyton to keep her room," he said. "Is it enough for that?" The kitchen clock is loud. I know exactly how loud it is because I listened to it for a long time while I tried to make my mouth work. "Buddy, Aunt Deidre said they feed me." He was not crying. That is the thing I want you to hear. He was working. "So can we feed them? With mine?" 8 years old. 5 Thanksgivings of standing at the end of a table being introduced as a category. A worksheet in a counselor's folder asking whether a mistake can be unmistaked. And the first thing my son did when he was finally handed something of his own was try to give it to the girl who got the good chair. I called Dale that night and told him to dismiss the civil case. He argued with me for 20 minutes, which is what I pay him for, and then he stopped arguing and asked me what I wanted in exchange. Because he has been doing this for 30 years, and he knows I do not give anything away for free. 2 things. A signed statement of facts in her handwriting, listing every account and every year and every document, which the prosecutor was going to get anyway, and which she was going to have to live with in a drawer somewhere for the rest of her life. And the name, written on the top line, above the facts, not to me, to him. I want to be very clear about what I did not do, because people get this part wrong. I did not ask for the criminal case to go away. It was never mine to trade. 4 counts stood. A trial date in February stood. The revocation stood. The federal injunction that came down in September, barring her from ever preparing a tax return for money again, stood and stands and will stand when she is 80. I gave away the one thing on that table that belonged to my son, because my son asked me to, and I made her hold his name in her hand while she took it. She came on the 19th of August, at 6 in the evening, and she brought Grandma Ruth's roasting pan. She set it on my top step without a word, the way you return a casserole dish to a neighbor you are not speaking to. 11 pounds. It had been scoured down to bare metal with something abrasive, and it had started to rust along the lid seam, and Peyton had never once turned on a stove in her life. I carried it inside and set it on the counter and came back out, and I did not thank her for it. She could not notarize her own signature, so a woman from the UPS store on Ridgewood came out to my porch with a stamp and a logbook and did it for $5, plus 10 more for driving out. Deidre wrote for a long time. It was warm and the crickets had started, and she sat on my top step with the pages on a clipboard on her knees, and she wrote 3.5 pages, and every time she got to a number she stopped and looked at the driveway before she wrote it. The screen door opened behind me. Theo came out in his socks with a popsicle. He had heard the car. He looked at his aunt sitting on our steps with a clipboard, and at the woman with the stamp, and he did not ask a single question, because he is a kid who has learned what paperwork looks like. She looked up at him. She had ink on the side of her hand. "Theo," she said, And my son said, "You don't have to feed me anymore, Aunt Deidre." I was not being cruel. I need you to understand that, because I have thought about it every day since, and I am his mother, and I would know. There was nothing underneath it. He had spent 5 Thanksgivings being told he was an expense, and he had spent 1 August finding out he could pay, and he was letting her off the hook the only way an 8-year-old knows how, which is literally. She put the pen down on the clipboard. Her mouth moved and nothing came out of it. The woman from the UPS store looked at her own shoes. Theo said, "Okay, bye," and he went back inside with his popsicle, and the screen door banged the way it always does. My sister finished signing. The notary stamped it. And then Deidre Kessler sat on my steps in the dark for another minute and a half with her hands over her face, and I stood there and let her. And when she got up, I said the only thing I said to her that whole evening. "Peyton's room is paid for. Don't tell her it was you." I opened my grandmother's envelope at midnight that same night, at my own kitchen table, with the boy asleep down the hall. It was 1 page, both sides, in the handwriting that used to be on the back of my school pictures. She wrote it in 2019, when Theo was 1, and she wrote it to nobody by name, because Ruth Ashworth was not a fool, and she knew what a lawyer's file was for. She wrote that she had sat in the folding chair on purpose for 30 years. She wrote that the first Thanksgiving after she married into that family, in 1955, they gave her the folding chair, and she took it. And by the time anybody noticed, she had made herself the only person in the family who knew how to make the food. And after that, it did not matter what chair she was in, because the head of the table is wherever the food comes from. She wrote that she had watched them start doing it to me the year I was 23, and that she had been too old and too tired and too much the mother of that man to stop it, and she was sorry. And then, in the last paragraph, my grandmother wrote this: "They will tell you they are feeding you. Count the plates, honey. Count who carried them in. You will find that you have been the one setting that table since you were 19 years old, and that everything they gave you out of a dish you brought." I sat in my kitchen with that page in front of me, and finally, 7 months late, I cried, and it was not about my sister at all. "Here is where everybody is now, as of this week." Deidre pleaded on the 9th of October to 2 of the 4 counts: third-degree felony forgery and third-degree felony identity fraud. She was sentenced 3 weeks ago. 5 years of community control, 200 hours, restitution of $19,268 to a credit union at $400 a month, and a felony record in a county where she has to put it on every application she fills out for the rest of her life. She works at a call center on Arlington now, in a building with 200 desks, and nobody in there knows what she used to be able to do with a piece of paper. Her commission is gone, and the finding sits in a state database anybody can search in 9 seconds. Her preparer number is barred. She cannot do the one thing she was good at, and she was good at it, and that is the part I actually feel something about. Chase kept his job and his license and does not know why, and sold his boat, and drives Peyton 22 minutes each way to Fairlawn Elementary because they rent in Barberton now, and I told the district she has family in the attendance zone, which she does. She has us. Aunt Charmaine tells the story to everyone. She has a version where she stood up at that table. Nobody corrects her. My mother started calling me on Sundays. She has said his name 11 times. I count. And my father put the house on Wickford up in September, and it closed the week before Halloween to pay off what he borrowed against it. And he lives in a 2-bedroom in Copley with a garage he keeps too clean. And last month he called and asked whether he could take Theodore to the license bureau when he turned 16 because he took me to mine. He said the whole name. He said it twice in case I missed it. I said yes. I said not until then, and he said that's fair, and he did not hang up, and neither did I. And we listened to each other breathe for a while, which is the most my father and I have ever managed. Grant Poole signed everything he was sent. He asked for nothing and got nothing. He has written 3 times since June and put $8 in each one, and Theo keeps them in a shoebox on the top shelf of his closet with rubber bands around it. And one day, when he is ready, he is going to open a drawer and find out that I kept every single thing too. I bought a table in September, not a big one. 6 chairs, oak, from a place in Norton that sells other people's furniture, $410, including delivery by 2 men who did not want to take their shoes off and did anyway. Theo picked it. He walked the whole showroom twice and picked the one with 6 chairs, and when I asked why 6, when there are 2 of us, he counted on his fingers and said, you, me, Peyton, Grandma, Grandpa if he's nice, and 1 for whoever cooks. I told him I'm whoever cooks. He said, then 1 for a friend. None of them fold. We are hosting Thanksgiving this year. It is the 26th of November, and there is a list on my refrigerator with 19 dishes on it in my handwriting, and 2 more in his, and one of his is just the word rolls with 3 exclamation points. He asked me last week what he should say when people come in. I told him he did not have to say anything. He said, no, but what if I want to introduce them? So we practiced. He stood at the end of our new table in his socks and went around an empty room and gave everybody a name and a thing they do, and when he got to the end of it, to the chair nobody has claimed yet, he looked at me and said, and that's for whoever's hungry. The sunflowers along the fence at the hospital courtyard came up in August the way they do every year, and I still feed 406 people a day, and my son has 3 names and no debts and a state ID card where he is blinking. I have told you all of this the way I told it to a detective, in order, with dates, because that is the only way I know how to hold something this size. But if you are still here, you are probably not here for the dates. You are here because somebody in your family has a word for you. Maybe it is a joke they have been making since you were a kid. Maybe it is a chair they always put you in. Maybe it is the way they say we're helping her out, when you are the one who shows up early and leaves last and carries it all in from the car. I am not going to tell you to blow up your family. I did not blow up mine. I asked for documents, I kept receipts, I said very little, and I let people who wear seals do the rest. And it took 9 months and it cost me a father for a year. I am going to tell you what my grandmother told me, because she was right, and it took me 31 years to be able to read it. Count the plates. Count who carried them in. And when a child at your table asks a true question, do not be one of the people who reaches for the cranberry. If a name came into your head while you were listening, tell me about it down in the comments. I read them, usually at 4 in the morning after a double, and I have never once thought somebody was overreacting. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of this one. Take care of the smallest person in your house. I'll see you at the next table.